On the second day of January, the man in the leather chair stared at the tree without really seeing it. His gray beard caught the amber lamplight. The half-smile on his face was a strain against horror. Through the arch, a woman in a familiar robe stirred a skillet, her movements unnervingly comfortable in his kitchen. She reached for the pepper without looking, her fingers knowing the cabinet layout as if she'd taken inventory of his life.
That isn't my wife.
Andrew's eyes lifted to the stairs. The guest room door was shut, and the quiet behind it was heavier than any sound.
She's up there, drugged. I have to move, but if I am wrong...
The woman in the kitchen sang a few notes of Silent Night, and the sweetness of it curdled the air.
How did I let this happen?
The events that brought him here started on December 22nd, when a doorbell rang and an old acquaintance walked in. On December 22nd, Andrew hung a glass ornament while his wife wound tinsel near the tree's lower branches.
Sharon, wait, slow down. It's been 10 years. She covered the receiver for a moment. She wants to reconcile. She's coming here today.
His hand stopped midair. The sister who swore she'd never set foot in this house.
People change, she said, and the phone clicked off.
The doorbell rang 20 minutes later, freezing them in the tinsel-lit quiet. When the door opened, a thin woman stood with a battered suitcase, her eyes glassy as pond ice.
She rushed forward, arms wide. Sharon, oh Sharon, I can't believe you're here.
Andrew shook the visitor's hand and felt no grip at all. She barely met his eyes.
The visitor stepped inside, and the door closed on the sharp December air, sealing the three of them together. Christmas Eve, dinner glowed with candlelight. The three of them sat around the table, plates steaming, conversation cautious and warm. The guest rose without being asked, crossed to the corner cabinet, and pulled a bottle of single malt from behind the lower door.
Andrew watched her pour his drink without asking which brand he even kept. That cabinet held half a dozen bottles, and she never hesitated.
The woman beside him touched his arm and laughed. Look at you, already making yourself at home. Some things never change.
Later, near the tree, Andrew caught a drift of gardenia. He turned. You wear the same perfume as Susan. Exactly the same.
The guest blinked slowly, as if the question traveled a distance. We always did. Since we were girls, it was our mother's signature.
The wife entered the room with a tray of cookies. That scent could knock out a horse. She still wears too much of it.
But it was the way the guest drifted to the mantelpiece and lifted a framed photograph. Andrew and his wife on their anniversary, that lodged under his ribs.
She looked at that picture the way a widow looks at a grave. Not reunion, not anger, loss.
Andrew filed the dissonance alongside the whiskey and the perfume, refusing to give the unease a name. But the seed was planted. On December 27th, Andrew noticed his wife's wedding ring hanging on her right hand, not the left where it always sat.
Susan, your ring, you never put it on that finger. Did something happen?
She pulled her hand away. It's nothing. A rash. The doctor said to keep it off the left for a few weeks.
But he saw her finger the next day, and there was no rash. Not a trace. Just pale skin where the ring should be.
That afternoon, the guest reached for a coffee cup, and he saw it, a deep, old tan line on her left ring finger.
That mark spoke of years wearing a band, but she'd come here single. Something didn't fit.
The guest tried to meet his eyes over dinner, her mouth opening as if to release something held underwater.
From the kitchen, his wife called. Sharon, can you help me with the pie? Now, please. The guest's mouth closed.
Long after the house fell silent, Andrew sat in his study and typed into a search bar, mail-in DNA hair comparison.
He ordered the kit with express shipping. 2 days. And with that click, he became a man who no longer trusted his own bed.
On the 29th, a courier handed him an unmarked box. Andrew carried it to the study and locked the door behind him. Inside were 2 sterile envelopes. a pair of tweezers, and a prepaid overnight mailer. He hid the kit between books on the top shelf.
The woman he believed was his wife hummed in the kitchen. He smiled at her, and the lie of that smile cut his stomach.
Past midnight, the house silent. He eased into the master bedroom and lifted a single dark hair from the pillow of the sleeping wife. In the guest room, the other woman lay heavy and motionless. He removed a strand from her pillow, fingers trembling. Back in the study, under a cone of lamplight, he labeled the envelopes, Master. Guest, his handwriting shook.
If anyone saw these, if she woke, the whole impossible game ended right here.
He sealed the samples inside the prepaid box. The address read a private lab in Virginia. Priority, overnight. He slipped the package into his coat and walked it down the block to the postal drop before dawn. The cold bit his face. When he returned, the house was still dark. He stood in the living room, under the tree, and waited for an answer he could no longer unask. On December 30th, Andrew began to see the evening pattern clearly. Every night, his wife made herbal tea for their guest. She carried the tray to the guest room and closed the door, and within the hour, the guest could barely lift her head.
The so-called herbal tea was laced with something. He was sure now. The drowsiness was not grief or exhaustion. He tried to catch her alone, to ask the question that had been eating at him, but the other woman never let them share a room for more than a minute. "Susan, I'd like to speak with Sharon alone for a moment."
Sharon is exhausted. She needs rest, not gossip. You can catch up tomorrow.
That evening, Andrew locked his study door and called Frank Landry. His voice was calm, but the request was precise.
"Frank, I need to update my will and discuss some hypotheticals. If I were incapacitated, or if Susan were compromised, what would my options look like?"
Andrew, in 30 years, you've never talked like this. Something's wrong. I have a friend, a nurse who handles delicate situations. Discreet, off the books.
Andrew wrote down a name and number. Now he had a backup, but the real answer was still days away.
New Year's Eve arrived in a wash of televised confetti. Andrew poured champagne and kept his eyes on the clock.
10 seconds. Count with me, Sharon. The imposter pulled the guest close, her laughter too bright.
At midnight, the woman Andrew believed was his wife turned and kissed him hard. Her lips were ice.
Every nerve in his body pulled back. That kiss didn't belong to him.
He glanced past her shoulder and saw the guest, the real Sharon, he suspected, pressed into the corner of the sofa, a track of moisture on her cheek. Later, while the television played a countdown replay, Andrew watched from the kitchen doorway as the imposter crushed a white pill and stirred it into a glass of water.
So that's how she does it, right in front of me. She thinks I am blind.
She carried the glass toward the guest room, and Andrew stepped aside, letting her pass, a hollow calm settling over him. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A lab notification, results available by secure link, January 2nd, 8 a.m.
2 more days. He had to keep this facade alive for 2 more days, or the woman in that room would never wake up.
New Year's Day dragged in a haze of forced smiles. Andrew stayed beside the Christmas tree, pretending to read a book he couldn't absorb.
Every time she walked by, he catalogued the wrongness. The way she carried her shoulders, the pitch of her laugh.
By evening, the house settled into a brittle quiet. The guest room door stayed shut, and the imposter retired early. Andrew opened his study door and locked it behind him. The computer hummed awake. The lab email sat in his inbox. Secure link enclosed. He clicked it with the steady hand of a man who had already lived 1,000 outcomes.
2 women, 2 pillows, 1 answer. After 20 years of marriage, I am about to learn if the last 11 months were a lie.
The page loaded with a progress bar that crawled, then a sudden jump. A document header appeared. Genetic comparison report.
He stopped breathing. The scroll bar on the right side of the screen was a cliff edge.
His finger hovered over the touchpad. One swipe would reveal everything.
For a full minute, he didn't move. Then he scrolled down.
The screen split into 2 comparison blocks, each with a verdict in red text. Sample A, master, sibling match 99.9%. The hair from his bed was Susan's sister. Sample B, guest, direct match. The hair from the guest room was Susan herself.
Andrew stared until the letters blurred. The answer he had not let himself believe.
The woman in his bed was not his wife. The drugged woman in the guest room was the real Susan.
He had lived with the imposter for 11 months, kissing her, telling her his secrets. The betrayal was cold, but the guilt was colder. He had let her suffer right under his nose.
His real wife had been trapped in her own home, watching a stranger wear her life. He sat in the chair until his legs were stone, the report glowing like an accusation.
And then only one thought: get her out, tonight, before it's too late.
He scrolled back up the report, cross-referencing dates with the hollow ache in his memory.
The only day Susan was alone in the last year was her mother's funeral, February 4th.
11 months. The woman he had kissed goodnight since spring was not his wife.
I served her coffee. I let her choose the movie. I let her lock my real wife in a drugged silence.
His fist curled on the desk. The anger was not for the imposter. It was for his own blind trust.
Frank, the nurse, police, all before she wakes, no mistakes.
He typed a single sentence to Frank. Not hypothetical. DNA proof. I need extraction at dawn. He set the phone down and rehearsed the morning like a soldier going over a map.
If she wakes early, if the guest room door creaks, Susan pays the price.
Andrew closed the laptop and waited for daylight. The worst part was not the knowing, it was the stillness before the strike. At first light, Andrew was in the study, phone pressed to his ear.
Frank, listen. The woman in my bed is not my wife. The real Susan is drugged in the guest room.
The line went dead silent before Frank's voice clicked into professional gear.
I've called the nurse. She'll be at your back door in 20 minutes. Police will stand by until you signal.
Andrew exhaled. The machinery was moving. Now came the hardest part.
He crept down the hall to the guest room, eased the door open, and knelt beside the bed. The real Susan breathed in shallow waves. He touched her shoulder gently.
Susan, it's Andrew. I know who you are. I am getting you out. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Andrew's throat closed. He had not lost her. Not yet. But the house still held the enemy. Andrew eased the guest room door shut and walked to the kitchen. Every movement was measured. He filled the coffee maker, the gurgle covering the silence, and willed the minutes to pass without incident. A creak on the stairs. The imposter descended, robe sagging, rubbing her temples.
Didn't sleep a wink. This house has gotten too quiet. She glanced toward the hallway.
Coffee's almost ready. Sleep's always rough after the holidays. He handed her a mug with a steady hand.
His phone vibrated against his hip, a 2-pulse buzz. Frank and the nurse were at the back door. Andrew gestured toward the mudroom. I forgot the paper. Be right back. He slipped out. He opened the door to Frank and a woman in scrubs. He raised a finger to his lips and pointed them into the mudroom to wait. When he returned to the kitchen, the imposter was stirring her coffee, but her eyes were fixed on the hallway.
She's getting suspicious. I've got maybe 10 minutes before she checks that door.
Andrew turned from the counter. I'll just check the guest room. You know how she gets. If we don't knock. He slipped into the guest room, where the nurse already had Susan's arm over her shoulder. Susan looked up, eyes finally sharp. Together, they lifted her from the bed. She swayed, but her feet found the floor. The three of them moved toward the back hall.
From the kitchen, the imposter's voice rang sharp. Andrew, do you want more coffee?
No, thanks. I'll be right there. His voice didn't shake, but his grip on Susan tightened.
They reached the mudroom. Frank held the back door open, a finger still pressed to his lips. The cold air rushed in. The nurse eased Susan into the back seat of a plain sedan, blankets already piled. Frank pulled the door shut gently.
Andrew leaned in. You are safe. I'll meet you at the hospital. I still have to finish this.
The sedan rolled down the quiet street and disappeared around the corner. The only sound was the crunch of snow under Andrew's boots as he stepped back.
She's out now to keep the devil in that kitchen busy until the police arrive.
Andrew stepped back into the kitchen, the cold still clinging to his coat. The imposter was no longer stirring her coffee.
What was that noise? I heard a car. Her voice was flat, the false warmth gone.
Took out the trash. The can was full. He leaned against the counter, arms loose.
She didn't buy it. Her eyes slid past him toward the hallway, and she strode out of the kitchen. Andrew followed, but didn't stop her. He watched her push open the guest room door. The silence that followed was absolute.
She turned, her face a stone mask. Where is she, Andrew?
Safe, far away from you. His voice didn't rise. And Sharon, the police are already on their way.
She lunged for the front door, but Frank stepped out from the mudroom, his wide frame barring the threshold. Through the window, the faint rise of sirens bled into the morning quiet, growing sharper.
Andrew stood in the center of the room, between the woman who had stolen his life and the door she couldn't reach. It's over.
The front door opened to two officers, their silhouettes sharp against the icy morning. The sirens died, leaving a ringing quiet.
Andrew pointed at the woman in the robe. That woman is not my wife. She's an imposter. She's been holding my real wife drugged in the guest room.
This is insane. I am Susan. He's been confused since the holidays started. Her voice pitched high, desperate.
Andrew pulled out his phone and held up the screen. The lab report glowed in the dim light, blocks of red, verdicts unmistakable.
The lab says different. Sample A from our bed is a sibling match to Susan. Sample B from the guest room is a direct match. You are not Susan.
The officer leaned in, read the screen, and nodded to his partner. Sharon's face drained of color.
The trust fund. Mother's money was for the married twin only. I stayed with her for years, and Susan just walked away. And she got everything. It wasn't fair.
She admitted switching at the funeral, drugging her sister, and keeping her captive for months. Frank stepped forward and recited the charges quietly. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She didn't resist. One officer led her out the door, past the Christmas tree that had seen everything.
It was over. But the woman he loved was still in a hospital bed, and the house felt hollow.
An hour later, Andrew pushed open the door of a private hospital room, the antiseptic air catching in his throat. Susan lay propped against pillows, her eyes open but filmy, tracking him with a slowness that broke his heart.
Susan, you are awake.
He crossed to her bedside and gathered her into his arms, feeling the terrifying lightness of her frame.
She kept me in a rental. I remember the smell of chlorine. Then the house. As Sharon, I couldn't speak.
You are safe now. She's gone. The police have her.
A doctor told him the sedatives would clear from her system within days. The emotional healing would take much longer.
We have all the time you need.
She nodded against his chest, a tear sliding onto his sweater. He didn't let go.
The battle was won, but the war for her peace was only beginning.
3 days later, Frank came to the house with a thin stack of papers and sat across from them in the study.
The charges are kidnapping, identity fraud, and aggravated assault. Her confession is documented, and the DNA report is solid. She's looking at years.
Susan's hand drifted to the neck of her blouse. Her eyes closed for a long moment, then opened clear.
It's really over, isn't it? She won't come back.
Andrew reached over and covered her hand. Never again. Frank will handle everything from here.
I'll keep you out of the courtroom, unless absolutely necessary. You focus on getting well.
The trust fund motive had been written into the district attorney's preliminary brief, a sibling grievance twisted into a felony.
As Frank left, Andrew walked him to the door. I don't need updates. I just need my wife to heal.
Frank nodded, and the door clicked shut. The legal machinery would turn without them now.
Andrew turned back to the living room, where Susan sat in the leather armchair. The tree was still up, but the air had shifted.
Weeks passed, and the living room became a quiet field where they walked around the crater of the holiday.
I keep reaching for the memory of those months, and there is nothing but fog. Did I really serve you dinner as her?
Number. But I kissed her goodnight for 11 months and didn't know. That guilt wakes me up at 3 a.m. every single night.
It's like she peeled off my skin and wore it. I don't know what belongs to me anymore.
Then we rebuild from scratch. I am not going anywhere.
In the following sessions, they mapped the damage, his hypervigilance, her fractured identity, and closed each hour with a held hand.
I want to frame the DNA report, hang it in the study, not as a trophy, as a reminder that I found my way back.
At first she recoiled. Morbid. But then her eyes softened. You really do need to see the evidence every day, don't you?
I do, because the strangest year of my life taught me one thing. Love without proof is just trust, and trust almost drowned us.
The frame arrived the next week, matte black and waiting. But they still had one more ghost to bury. One afternoon, Andrew found Susan standing before the Christmas tree, its lights dark, her arms wrapped around herself.
I stare at this tree every day. It still feels like she's going to walk out of the kitchen with that tea.
Then let's take it down. Right now. We don't have to keep living in December.
She turned, hesitated, then nodded. They pulled cardboard boxes from the basement and began unwinding the tinsel. A red glass bulb slipped from Susan's fingers and shattered on the hardwood. They both froze. Then she let out a thin laugh.
That's one ghost we can sweep up.
She crouched beside him and swept the last pieces into the bin. They packed the ornaments with care, enough for 2 hands to hold each memory.
The tree came down slowly, branch by branch, until only the bare corner remained, and the window threw clean winter light across the floor.
It's just a room again.
Andrew looked at the clean space and felt the first quiet absence of dread in months. The ghost was finally out of the house.
Andrew retrieved the matte black frame from the shelf where it had waited. The DNA report was centered, the red verdicts visible under glass. He carried it into the study, Susan following with her arms crossed, and set it on the desk.
It still looks like a crime scene document.
It is, but it's also the piece of paper that brought you back.
She ran a finger along the edge of the frame, then nodded. Andrew lifted it onto the empty hook they had cleared. The report hung above his desk, a stark composition of data and judgment, but their reflection trembled in the glass.
Every time I sit here, I'll remember that I almost lost you because I didn't trust my own eyes.
She turned into him, her face pressing against his shoulder. Morbid, but I understand.
They stood together in the quiet study, the framed report on the wall behind them, and held on.
The strangest year was over, and the evidence was finally where it belonged.
Spring light buttered the floorboards where the tree had stood. The house smelled of nothing but fresh air. Andrew and Susan sat on the couch, a single cushion between them narrowed to nothing. Their hands rested together on his knee. They didn't speak. The silence was not the heavy quiet of January. It was the quiet of a held breath finally released. The strangest year of their lives had ended, not with a bang, but with a slow, steady reclaiming of ordinary mornings. Andrew glanced at the spot where the tree had loomed and felt nothing but a faraway ache, already fossilizing into memory.
Next Christmas, we get a new tree, a different kind, something that hasn't seen what this one has.
Andrew squeezed her hand. Deal. But we keep the star. That one's ours.
She laughed, a small, real sound that hadn't been in the house for months. It filled the room more than any decoration. They had each other again. The evidence of that was not on any wall, but in the way her thumb moved across his knuckles, slow and certain. The house was theirs again. And this time, they both knew exactly who was home. The camera drew back from the couple on the couch, through the archway, into the study where a framed document waited on the wall. The DNA report hung in its matte black frame, the red verdict blocks as stark as the morning they had first appeared. It had once been an indictment. Now it was simply a fact, sealed behind glass. Some truths are so strange, they become the treasures you never wanted. Andrew kept the lab report framed, not as a wound, but as proof that he had found his way back. The study fell still, the report hanging in the quiet like a single enduring note. Outside, the spring sun crossed the window, moving shadows over the room where the tree no longer stood. The couple remained on the couch, their hands still tangled. The house wrapped in a new silence. She leaned her head onto his shoulder. The evidence of healing was not on any wall, but in the slow, steady rhythm of their breathing, and the screen slowly faded to black, leaving only the afterimage of two people who had survived the impossible.